When I was a manager at the Olive Garden, we used to get, well, they still do, quarterly checkups from a division within the company called QA. And QA stands for quality assurance. QA never announces their arrival. They never tell you they're coming. They just show up randomly on days that they choose. And they never show up at multiple stores or multiple restaurants in the same district. They always kind of hop around in the region to keep everyone off guard. So they may go to a store in Dallas today, or they may go to a store in Fort Worth tomorrow to keep everyone on guard. And their role when they show up is to make sure that the store is running according to corporate standards in every imaginable detail in that restaurant. They knock on the door usually first thing in the morning around the time that it opens. So the opening manager is going to be there at the store to let them in. Obviously, they don't have keys to the stores. And so they come in, they set their briefcase down, they open up their laptops, they put on white gloves, and they start assessing every single thing that occurs operationally inside that restaurant. And when I say everything, I mean everything. From whether there's a burned out light bulb in the dining room, to how clean the restrooms are, to whether every wine glass in the bar is completely and totally clean, no spots from the dishwasher. They check all of the cleaning supplies. They check every level of the refrigerator and the walk-in freezer, dry storage. They look at all of your computer records, cash handling records. They look in your temp probes for your kitchen to see if you are keeping adequate logs and records of all meat being temped with temperature probes to make sure that you're cooking meat to standard. You don't have to temp every single piece of meat you cook, but you need to about once every minute to 2 minutes, 3 minutes. They want you to temp things in the restaurant, and these computers on these lines and these temp probes, they track this stuff and it's downloaded in the laptops every night. They're called QA, and they give you a grade and an assessment of how your store is functioning based on the day they show up to look you over. The first year I was a manager at the Arlington South Cooper store, they showed up on each quarter, those first 4 fiscal quarters that I was there. I was the opening manager on the day they showed up, which is incredibly, incredibly rare because I was a sales manager. Sales managers typically work mid or closing shifts. We rarely would work an opening shift. Maybe once every 10 or 12 days, we would be scheduled for an opening shift. When QA shows up at the back door and that you let them in, your first order of business is you have to call the GM and the area director and let them know that they're in your store. And even if it's the GM's day off, he'll get dressed and he'll come in and do the walkthrough with the QA person that's assessing your store. You have to score, if our memory serves me correct, you have to score about an 89 plus on it to keep from getting in real trouble. If you have 2 consecutive quarterly quality assurance assessments in 6 months that are not up to par, someone's losing their job. That first year, like I told you, I was actually the opening manager for 3 of the 4 walkthroughs that we got that year. It started to become a running joke amongst the management team that if you wanted to know when QA was going to show up, just look at the opening schedule to see when JE is going to be opening the store, because that's probably when they're going to show up. I've seen these walkthroughs happen firsthand. I've seen the level of stress that it induces on the management team because they know how important these walkthroughs are. And there are pages upon pages upon pages of things that you're graded for. They put white gloves on and they walk around the store and they rub their hands across the decor in the dining room to see if it has any dust on it. That's how far they take it. They look at all your safety protocols, everything you have in place. They look at everything. They check the salt shakers. They're like the Gestapo of the evaluative process. I mean, they're not there to be your friend. They're there to look you over to make sure you meet corporate standards, and you just have to get out of their way and let them do their job. You don't offer them coffee. You're not allowed to interact with them personally. You just have to do everything that you're told to do while they're scanning your store over. I'm of the personal belief, I think the Lord is doing the same thing right now with churches. Probably always has. I think the Lord is sending prophetic and apostolic ministries inside churches. They're knocking on the door. Most of the time, people don't even know who they are when they show up. And they are scanning the atmosphere, looking over operations. And they're looking at churches with deep spiritual sensitivity. And they understand how the kingdom of God functions because God has been training them for most of their lives, if not from the time they were born. They know what the kingdom of God is, how it functions, what is and isn't of the Lord on a consistent basis. They're very discerning people. God is sending these types of ministries into these churches. Into churches, I believe, all over the United States, probably I can't speak for the rest of the world. It's been my observation over the past 30 years that the Lord, well, it actually says in the scriptures, God in his wisdom says, I'll send them apostles and prophets. Some of them they'll kill, others they'll persecute. The word for persecute in Spanish, I've mentioned this in other videos, is perseguir, and it means to chase away. In other words, the Lord is actually going to send apostolic and prophetic ministries inside churches, and they're either going to kill them, the church is, or they're going to run them out. I believe that's in the Gospel of Luke. In John 1, it says, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world didn't recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of a human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Unbeknownst to me, the Lord actually set my wife and son and I in a church about 1.5 years ago. 2 Christmases ago. My youngest son, Joel, got involved with some of the youth stuff during that time. And then my wife subsequently was attending the church with Joel when she was going there with him with the youth stuff, some of the high school stuff. And then I started going along with them to the Sunday services. They went from just being there on the Wednesday nights to actually going on the Sundays. So I started attending this church not far from where we live, about 25 miles from where we live. I started attending this church with my wife a little over 1 year ago, my wife and son, about 2 summers ago. And what I had no intention of seeing this as a ministry assignment. I had no intention of getting involved in anything because I know for a fact, turn my light on here. It's not coming on. I know for a fact the Lord has told me to stay very active in business. I believe He has, and He's kept me very active in business for the past 8+ years in the building business. And so when we started going, I had no intention of looking for anything ministry related. I was just there, just kind of keeping an eye on my wife and my son. And what I began to see on one particular Sunday began to reveal to me that the Lord was beginning to open up some prophetic senses for me to begin to see some things that were going on inside this church. And specifically, He started showing me that there was something about this church that He was very displeased about, that He was not approving of, and that was all I had at the moment. He didn't tell me what it was. I began to ask Him what it was, and then over the course of 2024, the second half, and into 2025, the Lord began to reveal to my wife and I very consecutively what the problem was at this church. And He began to give me very specific wording for how He saw things and what He wanted us to understand and other people to understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some more videos, and there's some things that I kind of need to teach on before I start to get into the real extreme specifics. All of these notes, I'm going to go over everything that happened for the past year, and I'm going to explain exactly what the Lord showed me and how it related to both the leadership and how it was affecting the overall congregation, and how the Lord confirmed over and over and over what we were actually dealing with in this congregation. Spirit of Jezebel. I'm going to do another video on charismatic chaos. It's going to be next. I'm going to tell you about something that happened in 2006 where the Lord began to speak to me about the charismatic movement, about the Spirit-filled movement, and the problems that are nesting inside the Spirit-filled movement. Charismatic chaos. I need to tell you another story before I tell you this story about what happened. And I need to do some underpinning and some undergirding for several more videos before you can even begin to understand, or maybe you will. It'll help some people to understand a little bit more what I'm getting ready to explain. So I'm going to cut this one off and I'm going to go into part 2.